Hello, travel biz owner. Welcome to my corner of the travel industry, the Strategic Travel Entrepreneur Podcast. If you're ready to have fun, be inspired, get clarity, and take action in your travel business, then you're in the right place. Let's jump in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. We have a case of the giggles because we were already recording before we even knew we were actually recording today. You're in for a super treat. One of my favorite people within the travel industry, just a really good friend, colleague, all of the above. Is joining me, Steph from Host Agency Reviews. So welcome back, Steph, to the Strategic Travel Entrepreneur Podcast.
Yay! Thank you so much for having me on, Rita. It's such a treat. I love hanging out with you.
Yes, and if you haven't tuned in before to any of our conversations, like this can go one of 50 million different ways. So we're just going to go on a magical ride. We're definitely going to touch on Host Week, which is happening next week, which is free. I know I mentioned this last week on the podcast, so make sure to register below. But any big things we should know about for Host Week? I say that like I don't know anything about Host Week. Um,
I don't know if Rita's told you all, but she essentially is the glue that holds Host Week together. Without her, I'd be completely lost and never staying on time.
I am the timekeeper.
She is the timekeeper and more. But some things to know. One, it's super fun and exciting. Two, if you want to join in on our coffee spots, which are our in-depth segments, we kick off each Host Week day with them. It focuses on one company and their services. And this year we have Travify, we have We Travel, we have Cruisin'. That's Cruisen for those that aren't familiar. It's a new app for people that are booking cruises. We have Uniglobe Travel Center and we have Incentive Connection Travel. But we are giving away dozens of Starbucks gift cards to registrants, and so they require separate registration. That's an important thing to know. So if you go to the Host Week page and just scroll down to the coffee spot section, there'll be links to separately register for those. Yeah, and lots of pet photos. I don't know if you've mentioned that, Rita.
I have not. I was like, this is not your normal. And I feel like that's kind of synonymous with both what Steph does and what I do. We don't do things normal. Like we have to be extra in our own special ways. And for Host Week, that means a lot of pets and a lot of music.
Yes, we've got the band back this year. So we'll be getting some good, fun music to rev everybody up or calm them down after a long day.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was like, I always love the Zen moments from last year where it's like, oh, after such a packed day because you may feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. It's a good thing. It's recorded if you need to watch anything back. But there are so many great presentations that are going to be happening between the coffee spots, our keynotes, and then the edges spots that if you have to miss something, just come back whenever you're ready and whenever you're open to like getting the information because it will be there for you.
Yes, it's great info. I even like the edges spots. I really love because I'm always learning
Yeah.
stuff. And the keynotes last year, I learned a ton. So
Yeah. Yeah. And this one really is, I mean, it's focused on hosted travel advisors, but I would say that it's really open to any sort of entrepreneur, which kind of gets me to thinking about, I mean, your own entrepreneurial journey, because I feel from what I know, you were inspired by your parents to become your own business owner within the travel industry. So what's your
yeah.
origin story?
Well, I didn't even know I was being inspired because my because I feel like I grew up in a really unique situation. Now there's so many entrepreneurs, but
Right.
when I was growing up, there weren't that many entrepreneurs because there was such a threshold to get in. It was a much higher threshold. But not only my dad was a firefighter for Minneapolis, and they work different shifts where they're working days in the fire department and they get a couple days off. And so it's very common for a firefighter to have like their own side gig that they're doing. They'll
Mm-hmm.
pick up random jobs or they'll start an auto repair business. So my dad had all sorts of business like t-shirt screen printing, and so we would help out with that. And my mom started an agency, and she started before that, when we were really young, the Cabbage Patch doll. She made knockoffs and she would sell them on the street corners.
No way.
Yeah, and then but my grandparents on both sides were entrepreneurs. So my grandpa was a farmer and had a meat shop, and my grandma was she had a greenhouse. And then on my other side, my grandpa had a Chinese restaurant. And so for me, like a 9 to 5 was so foreign.
Right.
And I'm not joking when I say that I, I think it was my senior year or my junior year of high school. I went to a temp agency because I was looking for a job that paid a little bit more.
Uh-huh.
And they put me in an office, and it was a 2-week assignment, and I barely made it through. Like, I was like, this is my idea of a living hell. Like the 8-hour days, I was like, is this what the real world is like? Because it's soul crushing. And then I
So
never worked
fascinating.
a 9 to 5 besides working at my parents' agency. I never worked a 9 to 5 after that. It was so terrible for me.
I'm like, this is so interesting too, because so many of us don't have that exposure to entrepreneurship. And I feel that's like what holds many of us back. I know, like, that's what held me back for the longest time because, like, if you had talked to my parents, especially on the paternal side, if you talk to my grandparents, everybody's like, you need a job, you need a job. Like, owning a business is unheard of. Like, that's not a
Mhm.
thing, that's not in the plan.
Yeah, it's really weird, and it's just funny because I didn't realize that until I got older, how lucky I was. Just I
Mhm.
think a lot of entrepreneurs, you think very outside the box and you do
Yeah.
things differently, and that's how you are successful. And so I was constantly seeing these things, and my mom's an incredibly creative person and always doing unique marketing and
Mhm.
things along those lines. So I feel very fortunate. But even with having this background, it was so scary for me to start my company. I remember being petrified when I left my parents' company, and that 4 months between when I left and when I launched HAR,
Mhm.
it was like all my self esteem went out the window. I was just completely
Okay.
petrified. And I was like, I'm not even relevant anymore. Like, my knowledge is 4 months old.
I was gonna say lies, lies.
I know.
Especially like I think like that's the hardest part if you have been employed or somewhere else before, is that I've heard this from so many people that they don't realize the transferable skills that you have because there's certain while you might not be doing the exact things you were doing, because like my former life I was working in the theme park industry, lots of restaurant experience, but most recently I was doing a lot of like finances in terms of labor and workforce. And I feel like that correlates a lot to what I do now because I love the puzzle piece. I didn't realize it then, but the relationship building part was something that fueled me. It wasn't until like I quit that job and I was like, oh, this is the part of the job that I really liked.
Yeah. It's really interesting, but it's so exciting. Like, I could never go back to being an employee. There's
Mhm.
just so much creative freedom when you're an entrepreneur that I love. I never get bored,
Mhm.
which I can't say for some of the 9 to 5 jobs I've worked.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, or I guess I shouldn't say 9 to 5, but I'm always learning something new, and I love it.
Yeah. One of our listeners last week had mentioned one of my recent episodes gave them the rocket fuel to like really dig their heels in and start paving their path to making their business successful. What would you say in that like 4 months that you were doing, you had this like transition period? What was your rocket fuel to keep going?
I had this vision in my mind for a couple years. I bought the domain a couple years before I left.
Oh.
Like, I just had always wanted to start my own company,
Hmm.
and but I also didn't want to leave my family in a lurch. And it's scary because I started my company when I was, let's see, I was 32, so I was,
Okay.
relatively young, um, and had just bought a house 4 years before. And
Mhm.
so there was just like a lot of scary things about it. But I would say like what kept me going was I had this vision. It was almost like I'm an artist or something. I had this vision and I needed to complete it. Like I was head down, just working and enjoying every moment, even though I was putting in a lot of hours as I started.
Uh-huh.
But because it was so exciting to see this thing that was in my head to like birth it out to the world, there's nothing that beats that. And the there's a lot of challenges in the beginning part of an entrepreneurial journey,
Mhm.
but when you look back after you've had a company for a really long time, there's something very beautiful about the beginning of it because it's very simple and it's where you can really focus on your company and what you want to do, and things aren't as complicated in the very beginning and allows you to really do the things you enjoy.
Mhm.
Um, so I look back on those memories fondly, even though they were very stressful at
I
the
know.
time.
I know. It's always the building blocks that are successful. Did you ever feel like you were throwing spaghetti at the wall when you were building host agency reviews?
Mm-mm, no, I I I felt really sure of I was well embedded in that area and very knowledgeable. And for 5 years, I'd been doing um, like running the host agency. And one of the things was customer support. And
Mhm.
so I knew where all of the holes were. For 5 years, I'd been hearing it from people where they weren't finding information, where they were confused, what the difference is. And just being a curious person for
Yeah.
those 5 years I was at my parents' agency, I was asking people questions all the time that I didn't understand. And I wanted to learn about other host programs, not because I wanted to copy them or they were my competitors, but I was curious because I would want to learn, say, things like, um, you know, what's the true difference between a host agency and a regular agency that has their own accreditation number?
Right.
Like, why do people have ARC and IATA and you have to have both? And why do people get a CLIA number when you have an ARC and IATA and they're the same numbers? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. So
Mhm.
I was always asking these questions, and I was just really excited to write about it and educate people because I found there was no information when I joined the industry, and it was a struggle. And I was lucky enough to have my mom, who was so patient, answer most of my questions, or people at trade show booths. I mean, I literally went up to the ARC uh, booth and was like, I have this really weird question that no one has been able to answer. Is there somebody at your company that can help me?
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like dogged when I want an answer to a question. And I'm like, I can't be the only one that's wondering this.
Right. Um, that's it. So I wrote down curiosity is a superpower because I don't think enough people talk about that. I think, like, especially newer advisors when they're starting their business, like you learn a lot about the industry, how it works, how your host franchise works, but we don't learn a lot about these entrepreneurial skills. And I think curiosity is one of those that's at the top, being curious about the people that you want to do work for and want to put out content for because your content leads to the work that you do.
I would agree wholeheartedly. Curiosity has served me very, very well through the years. And
Uh-huh.
it's not as if it's something I'm plotting. I'm just a
Yeah.
naturally very curious person. And all of those things I've asked and those little points all start to connect over time. And it's been really, really helpful. So I would agree it's a superpower for entrepreneurs and something people should be cultivating if it's a weakness of theirs.
Yeah. Yeah, because I would say like the major difference with kind of how we're building businesses that support the industry versus how advisors are building their business to service clients really is that I think we're more content forward than a travel advisor would be. But
Hmm.
creating content on the travel advisor level is still very important, especially when it comes to digital marketing and then
Yeah.
having a lasting presence, like having lasting visibility online.
Yeah. I mean, I do think there are some parallels though, because there's a lot of ways an advisor can go about growing their business. For one
Mhm.
that comes really, really easily to me, obviously, because this is what HAR is built on,
Mhm.
is educating people and like building relationships through that education and through that content.
Mhm.
And a lot of travel advisors are so protective of people stealing that information and
Right.
booking online. And I can't say for sure because I've never been a travel advisor, but I feel like if I was going into it, even though I know there are going to be some people that are going to steal my information and go online, or maybe another travel advisor. Because one of the things with HAR, when I put it up, it was like anyone could steal this information, and some people did.
Mhm.
And it's like, that really sucks. But HAR has also been incredibly successful. So you can have it both ways where you're putting this out, people are stealing it, but you're still successful because if you're very authentic, I think, and what you're doing and passionate, people can tell, and they even through the screen on their computer, and they will want to work with you. I mean,
Mhm.
I feel like all of us have run across that company where you're just like, we just moved down to Tucson for the winter, and there was a gelato place that is called Bella's Gelato
Oh,
that
my
apparently
place.
no one, we think it's so warm here coming from Minnesota. And so we're like, let's go out for ice cream. Everyone else is like, it's so cold, it's winter. So no one's in there. But they were totally my people because the Bella is their dog and there's a dog on their logo. And
Mm.
they have like they give little frozen dog ice cream cups to the dogs, and they take pictures of your dogs when you come in. And they put it on a screen that's up there. I was totally in love with them before I even visited. I was like, Paul, we have to go here.
All the time.
Although I am disappointed because even though we were the only people in there, they did not ask to take our dogs' photos. And then Paul told me, I think that's because there was a sign on the gelato display case that said there's a limit of, I think, like 4 samples. And I was like, I want to try this one and this one. I didn't see the sign. And so I
Oopsie.
asked for like 10 samples.
Oopsie.
Yeah. But I was kind of like, okay, they still should have taken the dog's photo though, because
Uh-huh.
our dogs are really cute.
Yeah. They are really cute. I know you can't see what's happening here, but she's got one of her pups on like the bed
Yeah.
right behind her.
My little Fen is always by me, looking at me,
Mm.
helping me at work.
I guess speaking of, I'm like, which route do I want to go? I want to touch on before I go this other route, touching on like authenticity, because I feel like that's another one that we don't talk too much about in being your real self and not being worried about what this person might think, what that person might think. I think that's a muscle that you have to start working out in order to be more comfortable with it.
Oh,
But
very much.
I feel like especially if you've known host agency reviews for a long time, Travel Pro listening to me right now, like I don't know a more authentic company
Oh,
within the
thanks,
travel
Rita. That's very kind.
industry.
Yeah, I think one of the things, because people will say, "Oh, you're just so good and natural on camera." And it's not that I was naturally like this when I came on camera.
Yeah.
It's a skill set that I've used. It's because I am on camera all the time and doing things. But I was just telling someone the other day about how when I first started, before COVID, people weren't really on Zoom that often.
Mhm.
And you didn't do Zoom calls with people. And so I was really having trouble making eye contact with the camera. And so I put
Mm.
this super, my sister called it creepy, but I was trying to make it more friendly to look at. So I put a post-it with a hole in it and then made
Oh,
like
that's
eyes in
funny.
a smiley face. And my sister was like, and that works for you. And I was like, kind of. And so this is all to say I have worked very hard and I was not a natural at it in the
Mhm.
beginning. I've become a lot more natural with it. And I think um it's definitely something like if people listen to my first podcast, it was terrible. Like the
Yeah.
sound quality was beyond awful. But you'll see, like, if you listen to our podcast over time, especially like Travel Agent Chatter, where we do it quarterly, so you get larger pieces of time, you can see the evolution and how much more comfortable I've become talking to people and recording and things like that. But in the beginning, I would be really nervous, and I would write things out so I wouldn't forget
Yeah.
things. And now I can do a lot more on the lam.
Yeah. I remember, I think my first official podcast interview was on Travel Agent Chatter back in 2020 or 2021. And I'm like, you can listen to it. It's gonna sound a little rough because it was my first ever one.
I thought you did great.
I think like that's you almost have to. I think the most important part is you have to make the decision that this is who you are or this is who you want to be. This is what you want to showcase the world. I'm so glad that like we've had this evolution of business and like corporate life where putting the humanness and putting our human needs and who we are as a person out there is just so much more a part of just everyday life. It's not just like, okay, we got to talk about the numbers. We need to lower our workforce here and do all that.
Yeah,
Um, it just flows. So you have to like make that decision to like put yourself out there and be comfortable with it. And then repetition. Because I remember
repetition.
even recording my first couple of Instagram stories when I had decided, because that's also a part of it. You have to make a decision that you're going to be doing something and stay sticking to it to see how it works. And I'm recording the Instagram stories being like, "Hi, I'm Rita. This is what I do." And then just keep doing it to make it like a more natural process for you.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it is the repetition is what's going to be key. And then as you repeat it, you're going to become more comfortable with like your, I don't want to say persona because it should be you, but
Mhm.
you're going to become more comfortable. Like, I am more animated. Well, I'm excited in life in general,
Mhm.
but like, I do throw a lot of energy at the camera because it's really hard if you're the only one talking and you're trying to, the other people that are streaming and tuning in can't hear you. You really have to bring a lot of energy to make it exciting. So I'm a lot more animated when I'm doing a podcast or a webinar than I would likely be in person, although I still am energetic in person. But
Yeah.
there are like I feel like some different persona differences that as you become more comfortable, you'll start tweaking. Like, you'll know that I use the word so a lot, and you'll become aware of these things, or that I always at the end of a sentence go up instead of trying to make it more variable and going down sometimes.
Mm.
So there'll be things like that, like through the years, that I become more cognizant of and try to work on.
Hmm.
But
I know that's something that I've wanted to like work on myself. This might be, I'm not sure if this is going to be a focus for this year or not, but I know one of my words is essentially. I say essentially a lot.
I've never noticed that.
Yeah. I was like, if I say it now, I'm gonna like really notice it. And alrighty is another one of my words. I don't
That's
know if
not a
I
bad
could.
one. I
Yeah,
love
I was
that.
like, I don't know if I could get who I had seen a social media post where somebody had replied tubular, and I was like, whoa, let's bring it back. There were a lot of people that were like, ew, that's gross.
I
I just like those quirks.
I would have been like looking at it and thinking, did they have a typo in there? What did they mean to say?
I thought of Encino Man instantly when
Yeah,
I heard
that's awesome.
when I
Oh
heard
my
tubular.
God.
I'm like, okay.
Super long ago.
Yeah. Which makes me think about values. And that's like, I saw Fenny and I'm like, dogs, pets are a huge thing for you. And like, we'll see that a lot through Host Week and some of the other values. And I think that just helps with the alignment when people are choosing, like, who do they want to listen to? Who do they want to work with? Like,
Hmm.
knowing, oh my gosh, this person also loves dogs, just like I love dogs, and being able to just bond. I was going to use another word. I'm like, that's not the right word, but bond over those things.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so important to, I feel like before the rise of the internet, companies had a lot more sterile uh,
Yeah.
facades, and now it's okay to talk about your personal life. I think even if the internet hadn't come, I've always just been kind of a little bit of a do my own thing type of a lady. But now it's so important to have things for your audience to get to know you, and so there's ways for you to bond. And like, I truly, truly love dogs, and I've always loved dogs. A little bit of
Yeah.
a dog crazy lady. But it's a great way, and I love seeing people's pets, and it's a great way to like bring people in, because during host week when we show everybody's pet photos, we have all the people in the comments, but I'm usually emceeing and I can see some of the comments, but a lot of time I have to focus on Rita. Rita makes me focus on the schedule, so I can't just answer everyone in the comments. Um, but it's like a nice way to be able to interact and bond with the audience and see who's
Right.
out there. So
Right. Yeah, no, we have to keep on time. That's my job,
very
wrangle
important.
everybody in. I obviously and like many of the listeners know that I'm a nerd when it comes to astrology, and I'm like, "Oh, that's my Capricorn show showing." That's my Capricorn rising there. I'd love to do a couple of like rapid fire questions, but like on the fly almost, because I'm like, I just wrote a couple notes down, but I'm like, we'll see what else comes up. What
Yeah.
would you say has been the most rewarding thing about entrepreneurship?
Hmm. Well, I'm going to say two. One is the freedom that it gives me. So, like, I have a pretty serious health condition, and it just allows me so much freedom and flexibility that I would never find anywhere else. So I love that. Um, the other thing I would say about entrepreneurship, like especially with HAR, it's really neat to be able to be a part of people's lives slash careers,
Hmm.
starting a new business. I used to be a teacher, and it was very obvious the impact I was having on the world and those around me. Like, you're very formational for these kids. And then when I moved into like working with adults and in travel, I kind of felt like, what am I doing? How am I giving back to the world?
Interesting.
And my mom said to me at one time, she was like, you're really helping people though. These are mostly female owned businesses that are wanting to usually have something where they can work from home so they can have the flexibility and the freedom and maybe raise their kids, or whatever their situation is. And I was like, you're right. That is such a cool thing to be able to be a part of someone's
Right.
life, even if I never even talk to them and they're just reading and getting advice and understanding how the industry works. Like, that's so cool that I was able to help someone in the areas that I struggled with,
Yeah.
even though I don't get to meet all of our readers. So I would say that's the other thing that I love about it.
Yeah, that was one of the big reasons that I had left my theme park position, because I just couldn't see what impact I was making, no matter how many times like I would ask to be more a part of things and do that. And so to be able to see like how the work that you do impacts people and changes their lives and positively adapts it in whatever way it does is huge. Um,
Hmm.
Another big thing, what would you say is a big lesson that you've learned from possibly an oopsie that happened during entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I had lots of those. Um, um, let's see. I would say one of the things that, like, when I started HAR, I never wanted to have employees because I don't like, I can manage people. It's not something that I enjoy and
Hmm.
that brings me great joy. Like, I would much rather be in Canva making some kind of marketing material
Yeah.
than managing people. Although I will say the team here is amazing, and it's the only reason I have a team because, um, but it was yeah, while it's not my strength, it wasn't as bad as I thought. Like, I was kind of forced into it because when I got sick, I was really, really sick and on medical leave for multiple years. And so then I hired on Mary, and I was really, really nervous because like Mary and I were college roommates and good friends. And I had seen through other, like through my parents, working with friends and having employees, I saw the challenges behind it. And I
Hmm.
was like, I don't want that in my life. And I don't want to risk any of my friendships, anything along those lines. But like a big lesson for me was, just because I saw that happen with my parents doesn't mean that that's like what my story is going to be.
Right.
And so it was being able to, it was actually like good to see that with my parents, because it made me aware of some of the areas where you can trip up and have these. So it made me a lot more cognizant instead of going in willy-nilly
Hmm.
and hiring all my friends. So I would say that was, I wouldn't say it's an oopsie, but it was like a big learning moment for me. Like, cause I didn't want to, it's not something I enjoy, but you can have a really amazing team, even if like managing people isn't your favorite thing to do in the world.
Hmm.
You still can have it. And it's possible to be able to work with friends. Mary and I haven't had challenges, but there potentially can, like Mary and I just work together really well and get along together really well. Um, so that's something to think about too. Like if there's things you're really afraid of, diving into why you're afraid. Because
Oh,
obviously, if I hadn't hired on, HAR wouldn't have been able to grow. And so it really impedes you growing your business.
right. Right. And I feel like one of the things that you do really well with us, me being on the team as well, is the autonomy that you're able to give us because you just said you don't want to manage anybody, and because we're so independent and we just get things done. We know what needs to be done. We know the standard it needs to be done at. I think
Yeah.
like one of my favorite things about the team is that like we just don't have to worry. We're gonna get the bleep done when it needs to be done.
Yeah. It's funny you call it autonomy, because I call it not liking to manage. But I'm glad you look at it as autonomy. But it is though, because I've worked with people, I've hired on people that don't work well on their own, and it was
Mhm.
a really difficult experience for me.
Mhm.
And so even though I put in the job descriptions, you really need to be able to work on your own.
Mhm.
I think going forward, if I were to hire again, I would um, check on that aspect a little better,
Yeah.
because it is super important knowing what I'm like and what my weaknesses are like.
Mhm.
If that's their weakness too, we're going to have a problem.
Yeah, no, I feel like it's just a really good case study that if you're nervous about like building a team and having like adding on help to you, like that is something that I would encourage you to consider is that you're hiring people that can be independent so that you also don't feel like you're micromanaging them as well. Because I know like that's a big thing when it comes to hiring. Um,
Yeah. And like I started Mary as an independent contractor, which was also helpful just to
mhm.
dip my toes in.
Mhm.
And the reason it was so helpful is because when you bring on an employee, there's so much more that comes with it in terms of payroll, and the learning curve is much
Right.
steeper than if you bring on an IC. And so that's a nice way to test the waters, see if you like the person, if you get along well and work together. So
Right.
that's something to consider too.
Yeah. Last rapid fire question. And I was like, this is a good plug too for the tech profiles because host agency reviews is not just about hosts and consortias. And I'm also like, I know running out of time. So if you want to talk about tech profiles, or we can just tell the people to listen on Host Week because we're definitely going to talk about tech profiles.
We're definitely going to talk about them, but very exciting. This fall, we launched tech profiles for travel agency software. So there's CRMs, itinerary builders, commission tracking, all sorts of different categories for you. And there's over 100, and I actually haven't checked lately, but over 120 reviews in there. And there's actually, it's been really neat. And because there's a lot of technology companies I didn't know existed that reached out
Right.
when we launched it. And so it's a really cool way to see what the up and coming technology is, or the existing technology. And you can get very similar to host agencies. There's a bunch of metadata underneath that you're able to see the cost, if they have a free trial, what's included. On some of the profiles, they have demos and all sorts of different things. So I love the new tech profiles and can't wait to grow them this year.
Yes. No, I'm like, oh, why why haven't those been out? And it just seemed like the perfect fit for them to be on host agency reviews. So going into that, what would you say is the a current piece of technology that you're having a lot of fun playing around with for your business?
Well, I was just in Canva this morning making some promo videos for Host Week. So that one's on my mind. But I would say, let's see, for technology, well, okay, this is going to be a boring answer, but Claude, which is like Chat GPT, but by Anthropic. And by the way, people, you should really switch from Chat GPT over to Anthropic. They're a much more, if you care about the values of the companies and things
Hmm.
like that. And then I really like Claude. He
He's
also is
great.
a very different experience than Chat GPT, I found. Like it's
Mhm.
more conversational and
Oh yeah.
I found it more helpful. But anyhow, I've been loving Claude and using him for all sorts of it's like fun to experiment different ways to use AI and
Yeah.
figuring things out. So that's my boring answer, Rita.
I don't think it's boring at all because we were actually talking about Claude and AI last week. So
Oh, great.
yeah, I'm like, if you need to know more about AI, just listen to last week's episode. But I think like that's a huge thing that's coming at the forefront, especially at 2025. Not only being able to use AI to help you be a more efficient human being, but then also, I know something that we've been talking a lot about on the hard team is like the ethics of AI when it comes to like when or how you use AI, but then also the sustainability of AI. I've been seeing a lot of like videos coming out recently in terms of the more that you ask, the more these data centers are heating up, which means the more water we need to cool them down, which means that there is a environmental issue when it comes to AI as well.
Yeah, a huge AI issue. I so one of the things that drives me crazy is I'm obviously not anti-technology, but I do want to be responsible about things and
Mhm.
I don't want to be using and taking up all this energy if I don't need to. So one of my pet peeves is when I'm on search and they have the AI generated answer on the and I'm like, "No, I did no, please stop
Right.
doing that." If I wanted AI, I would ask.
Right.
I'll probably look back on this in a few years and be like, "Oh, that was silly stuff." But that's how I feel now is I'm just like, no, but during Host Week, I'm actually excited because we have Armand on from Travel Wits. And
Yes.
so one of his co-founders is, I think, probably in the top 10 researchers, AI researchers in the world that I think I'm trying to remember. There's all these different categories of AI, and I can't remember which specific category he's on. Um, but yeah, so we're going to be talking about AI and have lots of great questions. Not specifically, a lot of times in travel, when there's an AI session, it's about how you can use it as a
Mhm.
travel advisor. And this will be more just kind of talking about AI in general and just because I'm curious about it. I've never really sat down with someone that knows AI really well and asked questions on where it is, where it's going, um, that sort of a thing. So I'm really excited to be able to tap into that source of knowledge.
Yes, yes. I just attended Podfest last week and I met somebody who has an actual degree in AI before AI was like even a big thing that we were talking about. So to hear his thoughts, I'm like, oh, these are kind of like the nerdy things that I love to like get an insider peek on.
Yeah, because it's an area. Obviously, it's affecting all of us and it's everywhere now. But
Mhm.
it came out of nowhere. You heard about AI before, but it was within 6 months. Suddenly, it was everywhere.
Boom. Boom shakalaka.
Exactly.
Well, Steph, like always, this has been a really great, fun conversation. I've also appreciated learning more about like your entrepreneurial journey, so I'm glad we could touch on that too.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much for having me on, Rita. I really appreciate it. And thanks for all your help with Host Week. It wouldn't
Oh.
it wouldn't be able to happen without you. So we very much appreciate everything you do. And even though she's behind the scenes and you don't see her very often until the end, when she comes on wearing her astronaut helmet with us, but
was like,
she's integral.
You'll find that I will say Steph's the pioneer of this, but we all are on board with it. Again, we do things a little bit extra. So if you are in the market for a new host, or if you'd like to see what's around because you haven't selected a host or a franchise, that's kind of like the meat and potatoes on top of all the education that happens at Host Week. And I say that because, yes, we do have a couple standard questions we ask everybody, but then there's always a fun question. I don't know. Do we want to say what the fun question is, or do we want to wait for it?
I think we can, because it's super fun. You can tell them.
So this year's fun question is that we asked all of the hosts and the consortia that are involved, if you were to serenade your host agency or your consortia members, what karaoke song would you use to serenade them? And the results are beautiful.
They're so amazing. We even have some singing.
Yes.
Like real singing.
Good singing. I mean, some not so great singing, but we love the effort. And I will also say you'll probably hear not so great singing from me.
From
but I think you've heard that before. So.
Yes, so we hope you guys can tune in, because it is a week of fun. There's lots of exciting things that go on throughout it. So
yes. So I'll make sure the links will be down below. I didn't even talk about this. There's just so much. We have a magazine, there's specials and everything, but if you sign up, you're going to get access to everything. So we will close our mouths now so that you can go and look at all the things for Host Week. But we thank you so much for being here. We hope you had just as much fun listening to us as we had talking with each other, and we'll see you on the next episode, everybody. Bye.
Ciao.
Thanks for joining me on the podcast today. Remember to check out the show notes for all relevant links and resources from today's show. See you next time.